at that, and then there have been some changes. I'll quickly point out to the tariff over the last several months, and we do have an updated tariff number that you'll see here at the bottom. So I'll be on camera here for a couple of minutes to kind of run through the beginning stuff, but for bandwidth reasons, right? I think we did have about 140 people signed up to attend the meeting. I don't know if we'll quite get there as of today, but we have several on the call already. So just for bandwidth reasons, if you could stay muted and turn off cameras. So we'll run quickly through the agenda. I'll touch on a safety message, which is traditional here at National Grid. I'll dive into just a handful of general communications and talk about successes for what was FY25, which is April through April of 2024 through March of 2025. And talk about where we landed. We'll get into the standard interconnection process or the complex interconnection process and talk through those. We'll have a quick portal moment. And then we'll talk about the flexible connections program and sort of where that is headed over the next year or so. We'll finish everything up with some Q&A. I'll jump back in for that section, but that's the agenda for now. I will go quickly to the safety message. So this is the time of year when we start to really see ticks kick back up here in the Northeast as we get into or out of the winter, out of the snow, and into the springtime. So this kind of affects us at work, at home, right, at play. So I thought it would make sense just to remind everybody about how to avoid ticks here, right? So just always be conscious of where you're working or what you're walking through, and then you realize that they could attach to you, right, with any of your activities, and always check yourself whenever you've been in those type of environments. Another thing is using a repellent. We were talking the other day that when I was a kid, I think DEET was bad. Now it seems like DEET's good again. So, using that or some other type of repellent to keep those away. Checking dogs and pets, making sure that when you are, again, in that environment, whether you're doing work outside at your house or you are, traveling through different areas as our work sometimes brings us to on these solar sites or for us in the utility. Just make sure that you're checking those clothes, you're showering or bathing when you're in those environments. And you can always sort of tumble your clothes in the dryer, right, and heat things up, and do that for at least 10 minutes to try to kill anything that may have latched on that you were unable to find. So keep in mind with those, I've heard actually a number of stories already of people finding ticks or being bitten by ticks already. So it has started, even though it doesn't quite feel like spring most of the time here in New England. So moving on to a quick few communications. And so we will have we started it last year. We started doing an open house. So these meetings are very general. We talk about the process, maybe a couple of special topics. But it's much more high level, and we don't get into specific projects or too deep into any specific situation. So what we've started doing is a in-person open house. We've done it in Waltham. We did it a couple times back in 2024. And what we do is we set it up a little bit more like a trade show, but we'll have subject matter experts in a number of different topics, manning tables with access to their computers and the portal to be able to sit down and talk more specifically about a specific project or situation. You can even combine subject matter experts or jump from table to table depending on what those questions are. But we've had some real good success and turnout over last year, right, on the two events that we did. So we're going to do those again this year. So our first one for 2025 is going to be May 15th, and so that's a Thursday, and we'll we'll get an invite out to this same group as we approach that date, with the location and the timing and all the other important stuff. But I just want to put a plug in for that because being part of that, had some really, really great conversations. It's great to be in person and look at someone face to face while trying to solve the problem on their specific project. So it's just a little bit of a different look and feel than what these webinars are. Right, I mentioned before that we'll post it. This is a link here, but we'll be posting it the same place that we posted it over the years, and we'll send out an email once it is posted to be able to take you directly there. Another thing I want to throw a plug in for is the transfer of ownership. This is huge for us, right? Just keeping our records up to date. We have a lot of work going on here in National Grid territory, both from a DG interconnection perspective, but also from sort of called a normal utility work perspective. We're seeing outages happen often, right, or planned outages, and we want to make sure more than anything else is that we're contacting the right group and letting them know. It feels like every time we have an outage, there's a phone call that comes in that basically says, "How come I didn't find out?" Or how come I wasn't told? And once we dive into it, we start to see that we don't have the right contact information for who owns the project at that time. So, why I look at it maybe biggest impact from an aftercare or connected customer standpoint. Obviously, there's other parts of it is these projects do change hands during the interconnection process, and we want to make sure that we're up to date on all that too. So it is every time that you do sell a project or move a project along or change that ownership, you should be notifying us. And then, we just want to keep that on our records to make sure that we have all the right contact. Real quick around the Schedule Z community solar, right? There is opportunities to change that now 6 times a year. I think that's that went into effect last year, if I'm not mistaken, but it's been in effect for a little while and gives that opportunity to be a little bit more flexible around the Schedule Z and where those credits can head. And I do want to take a quick minute to talk about successes for what was National Grid's fiscal year. So again, that is April to March. So this one is April 24 to March 31st or 2025. And we connected almost 200 megawatts. I think, all of us on this call have experienced some pain and headaches, right, around the process itself and how long some things take. But we are still continuing to get a significant amount of work through, both from the simplified interconnection side and the complex interconnection side. So you can see that we did almost 12,000 simplified residential apps to almost 85 megawatts. But in addition, complex, we did over 1,800 to 113 plus megawatts being connected there. So still quite a bit of work and applications moving through the process, and still a significant amount of megawatts being connected over the course of that 12-month period that we track here at National Grid. So a lot of success for the whole industry overall, even in sort of where the landscape is and some of the difficulties and headwinds that we see on a lot of these projects. So I just wanted to celebrate that success with everybody. So I will jump into the rest of the presentation here and hand it off to Anish and Claudia to start talking about the screening review process. If it hasn't happened already, I believe we're going to be dropping in a link to submit questions that we will address at the end of the presentation here. So I'll jump back on, but in the meantime, feel free to submit questions in real time, and we'll follow up on those at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Will. So good morning, everyone. My name is Claudia Codani, and I'm part of the screening team. I'll be covering the pre-application process with everyone in this meeting this morning. So the screening team for all expedited and complex projects runs through the pre-application for all standard track projects 250 kilowatts or larger, and then all applications and screening processes for all of the remaining of the projects. So as we can see here, We require pre-applications for projects 250 kilowatts or greater, and there are three different required fees. So for projects that are less than 250 kilowatts, we require a fee of $100. For projects between 250 and 500 kilowatts, 250. And for projects more than 500 kilowatts, we require 750, which is the maximal fee required. So when submitting a pre-application, we require four minimal items that are essential for us to produce and deliver a pre-application report. Sorry. So these are including, so these four items include like a site address or site location of the interconnecting infrastructure. We also require uh, the aggregate system size, the generation type, if this project is going to be solar, GHP, wind, or hydro, DER, and then a screenshot, which could be taken either from Google Maps, Google Earth, area assessor maps, or any other mapping software. Third items is that this pre-application will be delivered so to the customer, to the stakeholders, developers within 10 business days, which is also equivalent to the time that National Grid has as tariff commands. So after, we also have a duplication report entails information such as substation name, feeder circuit information, feeders, substation, distances, phases near the site location, indication whether the area is going to be network or non-network area, potential system constraints, application checklist, and the connected and pending aggregate DG on the feeder that we are studying for this specific infrastructure that is being proposed by the developer and stakeholders, hosting capacity as well for as it regards the feeder, and also any type of issues that a project in a certain area shows whether there is an ongoing ASO affected system operator study. Second slide, please. Thank you. So on this slide, we have an example of a finalized pre-application report, which probably many of you in this call may have received by me. And I may have also tagged you with additional questions, whether this is a qualified facility or other questions as well. So this application report is usually between 5 and 6 pages long and provides many beneficial information for the proposed system side. So in the first page, we have information that I went through in the first slide, such as feeder circuit information for the aggregate area, aggregate DG number, substation information. While on the second page that we have by the right here, we have details with additional notes about distribution system in the area, and it can include if there is any system constraint, affected system operator study, or also called ASO, group studies, what type of challenges are, if the feeder is a challenging feeder, if the substation that the feeder belongs to is a challenging substation, so it may need system improvements. So this is all information that will help the developer and stakeholder makes better decisions in moving forward to the application stage, right? Thank you. So on the third slide instead of this presentation, next slide, please. So we have required checklist items, right? This checklist is currently being updated so that it can also include more details than what it already has. But it has details with in the tariff or standards or ESBs. You can find additional details for the required documents that may be needed for the application phase, which is the next stage after the pre-application. And by reviewing what's required on this list, it helps prevent additional holds, right, to the application, and so that the project is able to move forward with the ease. I think this is it. I will now hand the mic to my great colleague Anish Ganta, who will be talking about application initial review process. It entails complex projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Hello, everyone. This is Anish Ganta. I'll be going over the standard interconnection application process. So, once a pre application report has been reviewed and accepted, the customer or developer can provide the required documents and submit an application. Interconnection applications are required for all projects. Currently, for complex projects, we have a couple of portal updates in the works which will correct the online application. 1468 DPU application form to the new 1573 MA DPU document is being updated so that additional PDF won't be required to be attached and e-sign to be addressed. In the meantime, the only workaround is to PDF sign and attach the application to the application form or print the application form, sign it and have it signed and upload it back to the portal. But we'll be correcting the online application soon to reflect 1573 MA DPU document. And going to the slide, the interconnection application is required for all projects. And for application requirements, all submissions require a completed application form, application fee, billing account number, system size, equipment assets, account location, site plan, line diagram, site control documentation, tech sheets, and legal information document. Larger projects could require additional forms such as derating letters, anti-islanding forms, UL1741 SP certificate, LROE letter, and projects with storage also require the ESS narrative and ESS questionnaire. Next slide, please. This slide outlines some of the most common limits details during application review process that lead to projects being placed on hold. Some of these are missing billing account number, work request number, complete anti-islanding form, and this should be a new version 4.0, which is updated recently. And these all must be completed in their entirety when they're required to be submitted. On submitted line diagrams, the most common limits details on the drawings are inverter and interrupting device nameplate rating, details, and relay settings. For site plans, the most common limits items are the point of interconnection, point of common coupling, company pole number nearest to the proposed PCC, and necessary access road requirement nodes. For the company pole nearest to the proposed PCC, if you're not able to find one, we will be able to assist during the app review process. For standalone ESS projects, the additional required documents are ESS documents, including the ESS narrative with intended system use. If auxiliary service is configured as a secondary service, auxiliary service work request number is also required to be shown on the one line. Next slide, please. Once the application is deemed complete, the project will progress to screening. Screening is required for all standard projects. Projects larger than 250 kW that are going to require further study, the screening review takes a detailed look at the proposed system configuration and area system infrastructure to provide corrections or feedback to developers before progressing projects for further study. During screening review, we also check if the project is on a radial or network system. If the equipment is UL1741SP listed, does the proposed DG on the system pass substation feedback and aligning screening? If any of the screening checkpoints fail, National Grid may require further study before providing an interconnection service agreement. Other reasons for projects under 250 kW could require further study are proposed interconnection in an area with ongoing group study, where any proposed project 25 kW or larger would be required to go through the group study process, which will be detailed a bit later on. Most 4 kV interconnections require further study. Every proposed project on a network or non-effectively grounded system will require further study. Next slide, please. These next 4 slides are screenshots of a finalized screening memo. Oh, no. So this slide, the first page is, no, next slide, please. The first page is laid out in 3 sections, with the top section showing the proposed project and site information. The second section will detail whether the project will require further study. If the project does not require further study, it could progress to conditional approval or a supplemental review. If the project requires further study and is progressing outside of a group study, this section will include an estimate for a system distribution impact study. The third section here outlines the feeder information, substation information, and total amount of proposed and interconnected distributed generation on that feeder and substation. Next slide, please. The second page of the screening memo details the specific project configuration and proposed equipment that will be provided by the utility and interconnecting customer. It also includes general site requirements and any additional requirements that could be requested as the project progresses to the standard process. All of the notes in this section will vary depending on the project type and size and configuration. The final section of this page provides the screening review notes outlining how the proposed project will progress and include some impact study or group study information and screening results. Next slide, please. The third page of the screening memo lists the proposed generating equipment that the system intends to utilize. Below that are also the general requirements stating that all systems need to utilize UL 174.1SB certified generation equipment. Will also need to comply with the interconnection tariff and NGRID's ESP. The only exceptions to the required UL 174.1 certifications would be gas power turbines, fuel cell projects, hydro, or rotating machines. Next slide, please. So this is the last page of the screening memo, which contains the links to the MADG website, NGRID's electrical specifications and standards website, and the National Stakeholder Information website, where you can find these slides, upcoming meetings, and additional study information. After this last page of the screening memo, the approved site plan and one-line diagram for this project will be attached. This then gets uploaded to the portal and an email is sent to the application owner with this finalized report. Once the screening process is finalized, we progress this to the expedited team for conditional approval or supplemental review. If further study is required, this project passes to the complex team to progress this through the standard path. That concludes my section on pre-app, application, and screening processes. I'll now hand it over to Jess Kosinski to walk us through the standard process. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Anish. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jess Kosinski, and I'll be discussing our standard and complex process to interconnect individual and group study projects. Next slide. Okay, so after the project progresses through screening, we'll need to determine which study path it will take forward, which will be provided by the engineering team. Study results will conclude any risks or impacts for the project. And then once the study is completed, the customer will receive an impact study report for their review and acceptance. If both parties are in agreement and there are no additional hold items or concerns, then the job owner will begin to draft the interconnection service agreement. After the ISA is fully executed, the project will continue to design, construction, its witness testing efforts, meter installation, registration of assets, and then it's going to close out with the authorization to interconnect. Next slide, please. So there are two initial options for how your project will be studied, either independent, or this will be dependent on specific criteria, including the size of your project and the area that it's located. It'll either be studied individually or through a group study. So on the next two slides, it'll show the timelines for both of those paths. Standard independent application, maximum number of days allowed to complete the efforts, not including whole days, would be 200 business days. But something to keep in mind is that the construction schedule is variable and established on a case-by-case basis. Otherwise, the rest of the timeline stays the same. Next slide, please. So for group study timeline, it is similar to the individual study process. The only difference would be the 100, 125, or 160 business day milestones. These timeframes are based on how many applications are submitted in a group study area, what the total aggregate nameplate capacity is equal to, and if the system modifications needed are more or less than $1.5 million. Next slide. The other factor that would extend these timelines would be if the project or group needs to go through an ASO study, which I'll touch base on later in these slides. But after the completion of those study milestones, the remaining part of the process stays the same as it would for the standard process, so including drafting of the ISA, delivery, and execution. Next slide, please. The summaries in this slide deck are not all inclusive for every tariff requirement applicable to a group study, so just make sure that you're clicking the link provided here in the slide to familiarize yourself with the responsibilities and those task requirements. Next slide, please. So here are some additional references for group studies. The group study website link has been updated and is provided here. Make sure to check on the monthly group study status report. This will give the most up-to-date status on each ongoing group study and bring additional visibility to any expected timelines or certain milestones related to your group study or your project. The group study status map is another helpful tool to see when group study windows are open and closed. Next slide, please. So the next thing I want to talk about is if your project has an energy storage system or an ESS. During the screening process where the substation and the EPS components are identified, the proposed operational information for the ESS is collected through the ESS narrative and the ESS questionnaire. So it's just giving us all of the information for that system. So this includes standalone system and projects that have a co-located system. Study timeframe will be affected based on the customer's desired operational mode. So a mutual agreed upon timeline would be chosen if the ESS operates in a scheduled or an unscheduled manner. And then if the ESS performs on a single mode of operation, then it will progress through the typical 55 business day path. The company will provide the customer with a preliminary assessment detailing system capacity and potential EPS modifications to interconnect the ESS. Once delivered, the customer must respond within 10 business days to notify the company how they want to proceed forward. If we do not receive a response within that time frame, then the project will be studied in the mode of full nameplate capacity in an unscheduled operation, so in that 55 business day time period. Design changes are subject to DG tariff policy for moderate or significant changes. The company determines whether the change request is moderate or significant, also on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk through some common errors or things to keep in mind while going through the study and the ISA stages of this process. There are specific cases listed here, but the general idea is to ensure that all of your documents are accurate and up to date. Often, as mentioned before, there are changes with the customer, legal entity, retail customer, landowner. So make sure that when those changes do occur, you're updating the appropriate legal document information and notifying your job owner. Another important one that we've seen more recently is errors with the PE stamps on the one lines. So I just wanted to go through the criteria for that to just make sure that the symbol or the image is in the form of a rubber stamp, must contain the words Commonwealth of Massachusetts, must contain the words professional engineer, and have their name and registration number. It has to be signed and dated with eligible handwritten signature adjacent to the seal, or properly encrypted digital signature. If the digital signature is applied, it must have an electric authentication process attached to it that is uniquely associated with the professional engineer that is uniquely linked to the specific document in a manner that will invalidate the digital signature if any part of the document is changed. And lastly, just the stamp should not be able to be copied or moved and is not allowed to be used by another person. So just remember that catching and addressing these errors is both the customer's responsibility and the job owner, but finding these issues does subject the project to be placed on hold. So just make sure that we're getting those addressed in advance. The project will not progress forward until the items are addressed and approved by the company. And then if the items are not addressed and approved by the end of that hold date, the project is subject to withdrawal. Next slide, please. All right. Additionally, we do have some issues that we find with completion documents. Again, we have a bunch listed here for your reference, but the big focus is just to have those documents submitted correctly so that we can provide those benefits for the customer. For example, if your project is greater than 60 kilowatts, make sure to have all of your qualifying facility documents, including your W-9, ACH, supplier enrollment form, and your asset registration. Next slide, please. All right, so now we can look at some standard review path reminders just to reiterate. So this slide really just emphasizes the reason for the project is to be studied, and that is to understand its impacts on the area and its impacts on the area that it's proposing to interconnect to, and what system modifications are needed for that to be in place. One of the items I think that is important is the second bullet there. All projects greater than a megawatt will require ISO New England I-39 submission for ISO NE approval, regardless of whether an ASO study is required. The submission will take place during the distributed system impact study. Once it's submitted, the project will be placed on an ASO hold until the ISO New England approves the ASO once it's approved or if the ASO study is complete. This is for projects that are studied individually or in a group study, but I'll go further into detail on this in the future slides. Next slide, please. All right, so all metering and metering requirements are detailed in the electric system bulletin under the specifications for electrical installations. There's a section that says metering, but you can always reach out to your job owner in advance or if you have any questions regarding metering. Since some of these will have long lead times or prep time, it is important to have those discussions ahead of time before reaching the closer point of authorization to interconnect. So one of the important ones I thought was important listed here is that in Massachusetts, it is required to install an interval meter for projects that are greater than 60 kilowatts. These meters have to be wireless or on a phone line. If the meters are wireless, then it is required to run through a 4G wireless signal test on a Verizon network. There is a link there at the bottom of the page just for easy reference for that form. And then if the meter is on a phone line, it has to be dedicated and terminated at the meter location, and the line must be 100% copper. There's no exceptions. If you try to use like a fiber line, it won't communicate properly. Next slide, please. So I won't go through all of these, but again, this is a good reference slide for you to go back to. We have a link here for the most recent checklist updated on the NCAP portal. But as you go through these lists, you can reach out to your job owner again with any questions or any clarification. Make sure that the witness test checklist does include pictures of the generator nameplate capacity. And just remember that all the checklist requirements must be approved by National Grid and customer construction must be completed before you schedule your witness test. With regard to compliance and asset registration, National Grid will manage the registration process with ISO New England unless the customer desires otherwise. So this is for projects not participating in SMART or establishing like a generator as a qualifying facility, but intends to participate in the New England wholesale electricity market. Next slide, please. Right. So document revision and restudy reminders for projects that want to submit a change either before or after the study is completed. You'll need to fill out a change request form, which can be found on the Interconnections document website, which we've provided a link here as well. If you're making changes after a study is completed, the customer needs to inform National Grid of those changes by clicking the change request button in the portal and provide updated supporting documents, including your one-line, site plans, tech sheets, etc. For one-lines and site plans that do show those changes, ensure that those changes are clouded and the revision block is signed and dated, showing the updated rev number as well. Another good reminder is that restudies can cause impacts to project costs and timelines, even if the scope of work doesn't change. So refer to the moderate and significant change guidance prior to submitting your request. And then lastly, if the ISA has been fully executed, National Grid's design and construction process may be put on hold during the restudy until the ISA amendment is fully executed. So this will be determined by the company, and reevaluation of the construction schedule may be necessary or determined during that restudy process. Next slide, please. The most important part of this slide is that meeting these target dates does not guarantee end-of-year interconnection for your facility. However, it does give National Grid a better opportunity to meet your request. These target dates have been established based on companies' experience with delays to end-of-year processing. So the interconnecting customers' planning and cooperation is essential to this process. Keep in mind that authorization to interconnect will not be issued until the interconnecting customer has satisfied all interconnecting requirements, including but not without limitation to the wire inspection, all compliance documentation, the witness test, ISO New England registration, and the required meter is installed. There is a link at the bottom of the screen here additionally for information just as another resource for you. Next slide, please. So now we're going to dive into the fulfillment of ISO New England's I-39 requirements and go into a little further detail about the ASO study process. Next slide. So either of these model and payments will be required based on the size of your system. So for all systems that are over a megawatt, PSCAD model and model review payment is needed. For all systems that are 5 megawatts and above, you'll need a PSSE model and model review payment regardless of an ASO study requirement. For all proposed projects greater than a megawatt, they are required to receive ISO approval for either a GNF, which is the generator notification form, or a PPA, which is a proposed plan application. An ASO study may be needed before this requirement. Next slide, please. So with the initial model request, the most important thing to remember is that the models will not be reviewed until the payment has been received. Once the payment is received, it will cover the costs for 3 attempts. After the 3rd attempt, if there are still deficiencies, then the customer will need to submit an additional payment to further review that model. The initial request for required models and model review payments must be submitted within 30 business days. But keep in mind that it is unlikely that the model will be approved after the 1st attempt or initial submission. So getting those models in as soon as possible will only help hold more time for those additional attempts. And finally, failure to provide an approved model by the model approved due date will result in the project being subject to withdrawal from the queue, in which case you would have to reapply if you are planning to move forward. Next slide, please. So the first 3 bullets here are mentioning when an ASO study is needed and when projects require ISO approval. And then the table at the bottom is just showing a timeline of when the request, when to request ISO New England's ASO study determination. So in order to receive ISO New England ASO study determination, a project or a group study must have confirmed transmission injection points, and all required models must be approved. A project's DSIS will be placed on hold for ASO purposes when transmission injection points are identified from engineering. And then customers with models outstanding or models that are not fully approved by the date of transmission injection points are identified to be subject to withdrawal from the queue. Again, unless you're planning to move forward, in which you would have to reapply if the project does get withdrawn. Next slide, please. All right, so some additional information here. In the event that an ASO study is not required, if it is not required, then the project will be presented as a DNF at the next monthly NEPOOL RC meeting to get that approval. It generally takes about 1 to 3 weeks after that meeting to get an approval letter. So then if the project is not part of a group study, it will resume once that approval letter is received. And if a project is part of a group study, then it will stay on hold until all other members in the group that are greater than a megawatt receives an acceptance or an approval letter. Next slide, please. All right, a few additional reminders here on this slide for this process. So all projects that are 5 megawatts or greater will automatically require a comprehensive ASO study. This is the third level, third level of study. So this level of study is the longest and generally takes about 6 to 12 months to complete. But the next slide will show additional timelines for the other 2 levels of studies as well. And then for pre-ASO study commencement, we have the steps listed here, but the big item to keep in mind is that prior to an ASO study being able to start, all other ongoing ASO studies and FERC studies within that same electrical area must be completed first. And then finally, all ASO study payments have to be received before the study can officially begin. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the rest of the timelines for the other 2 study levels to be completed. And then there is a link below that's a helpful tool to show ASO study updates. These updates are published monthly, so just make sure that you're checking on them periodically just for your records so you can get the most accurate information. Next slide, please. So these are just reiterating what happens after the completion of an ASO study. If the project is presented as a PPA or a GNF, it will need RC approval. If a project is not part of a group study, it will need RC approval. And then if it is part of a group study, it will stay on hold until all those other projects receive that RC approval. Next slide, please. All right, so if project changes are made after the approval letter is received, it would trigger some of the following here. So the table shows examples of what would happen depending on what type of project change is requested. I won't go through the whole table, but you can see that most of the changes will trigger either a revised ASO study, a revised GNF or PPA submission, a new PSCAD or PSSE model, and those model review payments. So it's just a good reference as well. Next slide, please. So this slide has all of the important references, reports, and resources that we discussed during these slides. It's a great slide to refer back to, but again, you can always talk to your job owner if you have any questions or concerns. And then lastly, before we move on to the next section, I did just want to provide everyone with the latest update on the FERC Order 2023. So on April 4th, 2025, FERC issued an order with ISO New England's compliance proposal to FERC Order 2023. In response to the order, ISO New England is planning to adjust the dates that are necessary to shift the TCS in the compliance proposal by approximately a year. The revised TCS start date has been moved to October 10th, 2025. So while we are proceeding in the immediate business as usual, National Grid is preparing for the impacts the revised TCS start date may have on certain DG projects in the queue, and will provide additional updates for those affected customers once we have those impacts and once they become more clear. There is more information available directly on ISO New England's website as well, so you can also check that. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Alex to talk about post-connection and incentive program support.
Great, thank you, Jess. So hi everyone, my name is Alex Bellavia. I'm a regulatory specialist with CEI, and I'm going to talk about post-connection support as well as how we support with our incentive programs as well. So for once you've already had your system connected and you want to submit a request or a question, you can do that through our DG portal, which I'll get to in a second. Any customer that or a party that is a stakeholder can submit a request or an inquiry. But please know that if you want to make changes to the system or the account, we need the proper authorization from either the billing customer and or system owner. But we are able to take on a lot of different requests through this portal. So if you have billing inquiries, credit allocation inquiries, if you're doing a transfer of ownership, information around power quality or high voltages, credit allocation change requests, other inquiries related to post-connection, or if your system is being terminated or decommissioned. We can move on to the next slide. And so to be able to submit a DG inquiry, you'll go to our GridForce site, and that will bring you right to our customer application portal. From there, you'll see the options for Massachusetts and New York, along with a few boxes on the side. And if you click that Contact Us button, it's going to bring you directly to that DG inquiry submission form. So it's very simple, very straightforward, brings you right there. We can go to the next slide. So where to find allocation change forms. So if you're a smart or a net metering customer and you're looking to change the percentages of allocations to different accounts, on that same page, the fourth option down, it says post interconnection. And so you can click that, and then we can go to the next slide. And from there, it's going to bring you to the DG post interconnection page. You can either click the words that say Massachusetts post interconnection or just click the picture as well. That's totally up to you. And from there, it's going to bring you to this page that says, has these pictures of the solar panels, the batteries, etc. And there's going to be an option called Massachusetts Credit Allocation Change Request or Inquiry. And that's going to bring you to all the information and documentation you'll need to begin changing your allocations. So both the inquiry and the allocation change, relatively straightforward, very minimal clicking, searching, etc. We can go on to the next slide. So just some information about credit allocation changes. For net metering customers, we allow up to 6 allocation change requests per year. In addition to removing or swapping accounts, so where if you're not doing a full change in allocation, but just taking or removing an account that is no longer active or no longer going to be receiving these credits, we'll also process that. Under both of our smart provision, which is MDPU 1574, and the net metering provision, MDPU 1578, National Grid will carry forward any remaining credit balances on a customer account. And then they, except for smart AOBC facilities and cap-exempt facilities serving on-site load and net metering, and they will have an option to cash out this excess credit balance at the end of each fiscal year. Carrying forward of credit balances applies to both host and recipients, but recipient customers are not eligible to do any sort of cash out. So those credits will continue to roll forward on their billing account until they're utilized. If a billing account closes before the credits generated are allocated, that percentage will then remain on the host customer's account and then can be reallocated in future changes. And so we can move on to the next slide. And so here are just a handful of different resources for doing those credit allocation changes, along with what I showed earlier regarding the portal path. So for net metering, complex and or smart and net metering, you need to submit a Schedule Z form and the Schedule Z Excel. In that Excel, make sure you're only changing the spots that are specifically for inputting information, because we use those sheets for automation. If you are a net metering customer looking to do an account removal or swap, so again, that's just in an instance where maybe that account closed or something, you're either going to submit the removal or swap form. And these links are all live and will be available once this PowerPoint is shared. If you're closing an account and would like to have your credits applied to another account, you can use a one-time transfer form. These requests must be from the host customer or the recipient customer on the closing account. So if you're looking to just transfer to a single account, there's a specific form for just that. But if you're looking to do it to multiple different accounts, then there's a separate form for allowing space for that. Just however, as a point of clarity, credits can only be transferred within the originating account's load zone, and the exception of that is, again, those cap-exempt facilities serving on-site load. They are able to transfer, as well as new solar facilities are able to transfer to other load zones. Accumulating credits on a satellite account are only allowed to be transferred in a final status. So again, if it's a recipient, if it's a satellite, they are only able to transfer those credits if that account is closing. Otherwise, they do remain on the account. And then lastly, we otherwise are not permitting one-time transfers for net metering customers. This was a practice we had done in the past, but it is not something we have been honoring as of late. So beyond these account closures, we are not permitting one-time transfers. And then lastly, for SMART, for our alternative on-bill credit or AOBC customers, there's a separate worksheet that's very similar to the Schedule Z for allocating those credits. And then we can move on to the next slide. These are just a couple quick links as well that are helpful to understand more about the post-connection and regulatory resources. So you have a separate portal page there for net metering, for SMART, and then more generally incentives. And so a lot of different forms as well as regulatory documents and information are all available on those hubs. So if you're involved in these programs, I definitely recommend potentially bookmarking these, as we keep these updated very frequently as any sort of processes change. And we can hop to the next slide. Just a few important reminders for interconnected customers. Please make sure that your emergency contact information is updated. And if it has changed, please inform us. If there's outages or if there's other information we need to contact someone at that facility, we need to be able to make sure we're getting to the right person. Additionally, if you're not using it already, if you're a commercial customer, you can use My Business account. And then our solar hub is also available, which helps provide a lot of information for prospective solar customers and sort of what the process will entail. We can go on to the next slide. And so just one of the last things I want to touch on today is if you plan on making physical changes to a already connected project. If you're looking to make any changes to these projects, you need to submit a DG inquiry via the Contact Us button, which I showed earlier. Your case will be reviewed and routed to an account manager who's going to guide you through what is needed based on the type of changes or upgrades. Whoever is managing that ask will then sort of manage and help you with that relationship. But just as an important point, only non-significant changes will be handled this way. If you submit an inquiry and we determine that to be a significant change, it is going to require a new application. But again, we're going to inform you of that when you submit this inquiry. So just make sure to, if you plan on any changes, submit the inquiry, let us know what it's about, and then we'll help guide you in sort of what steps are needed next. But just an example of a non-significant change would be an inverter update or replacement at the end of its warranty or life cycle. But an example of a significant change would be adding a battery to a connected solar project. And then again, just as you make these changes that can change the cost and timeline. So if it requires study or review or witness test, that all will potentially add time and or costs on. If you make changes without informing National Grid, this can be considered invalidating the ISA, and it will force us to disconnect the project until we can get those corrections made. So just again, if you're going to make any changes, please inform us so that we can help guide you to make it as expeditious as possible. So that's all I'm going to have today for our post connection, and I'm going to pass it on to Karen Nail for our portal moment.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, guys. Can we go to the next slide? So I'm going to talk today about portal registration and kind of the aspects around our registration and how that'll work for your business. So if your company has never registered, or if you have a new employee who needs to register, you're going to have them start by clicking the login button. Next slide, please. And then they will click not a member. Next slide. These are the only two with just a little bit on them. And then this is the portal registration for a new company. So you'll fill out all of your company's information. The company email that you put in here is going to be an email address that you need to give the remainder of your employees so that they can register properly in the portal. So make sure you remember what email address you put in there. And just fill out all of that information for your company. Next slide, please. And then if you are an existing company, the process is a little bit more streamlined. You will choose existing company when you are prompted at that question, and then you will just need to fill in your first and last name. You should verify that the company name is correct there, and then you'll put in your email address, password, and confirm your password, and you'll click register. And then next slide. And if you are the company admin, meaning you're the first person who registered for your company, or you may have spoken to us and had somebody else assigned as your company admin, the company admin has some extra capabilities under the Manage Contacts button. Next slide, please. So one of the first capabilities is they can manually invite somebody to the portal, which alleviates that new employee from having to go through the registration process manually. They'll get an email and they have to click a couple of links, follow the instructions, and then they'll be registered for the portal. If they do register manually by themselves, it's a good practice for the company admin to come into this menu and go ahead and approve or activate that user. That will give them access to all of the company's projects, which will allow them to be able to see them even if they're not on the application roles. You can also remove users or reactivate users from the screen. Next slide, please. If you choose to create a new contact, you'll just fill in the information that's provided for you, and that will send off that registration information to your new employee or your new registered portal user. Next slide, please. And then this is just a bigger picture of the new users with existing company. It's going to ask for that email address that we have as your company admin. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to us with the contact us form, and we can go ahead and get that information over to you or get it updated if you need it updated. Next slide, please. And then this is just another picture. Make sure you look at that company name and fill in the information. Next slide, please. And we talked earlier on another screen about approving users that have registered for themselves. So that just shows you that approve button. Next slide, please. And you can remove the user. So if somebody leaves your company, you definitely would want to deactivate their access to your portal projects. You just want to be secure and protect your company. So I would definitely recommend if anybody leaves the company, you remove that user. If they are taking just a sabbatical, you can still remove them and reactivate them later. You do have the option to reactivate somebody if they come back. Next slide, please. And then this shows you the activate button as well. So if they have been deactivated and you want to reactivate an employee that you've previously removed from your portal access, you can just turn them right back on with the activate button. Next slide, please. And then we also just wanted to bring your attention to the newly designed standard DG process steps. This page has been fully updated and has all of the documentation that you need to go ahead and get your standard DG process onboarded and on its way. All right, and then I am going to hand it off to Armando with Flexible Connections program.
So thank you very much for the opportunity, everybody. My name is Arnaldo Arnal, and I'm helping scaling up our next offering called the Flexible Connections offering. So if you can go to our next slide. Perfect, thank you. So through Flex Connect offering, customers will be able to omit potential expensive system upgrades and therefore reduce timelines to interconnect by not having to wait for those system upgrades. Now, the best way to put this is basically imagine that your site will have a dimmer, and we will be sending over a curtailment signal through that dimmer to your site. And therefore you can, whenever that feeder is reaching its maximum capacity, you will just follow the signals from that dimmer and lower the output of your site into the grid. And obviously being safety first, we will have additional safety precautions as a on-off switch. If your site is not responding to that dimmer, we will basically shut off the site in order to make sure there's no issues on our end of the site. And if you can imagine, our grid basically has different peaks throughout the year. So this is not something that's going to be constantly happening. This will just happen whenever there's a peak on that specific feeder, and we'll just send a signal to reduce the output that you're sending into the grid. So if we can jump to the next slide. So what we've come up with is two current offerings. Now, currently we are in the process of piloting these offerings. You might have heard of LPC or local power controller, or ARI or active resource integration. So for example, how this would work is if you, a developer, send out a application for a 1 megawatt solar site. Through our screening team, we perform studies and review, and if there's no issues with interconnecting that site, you will just follow that simple standard interconnection process. Now, if through that study we find there's some issues with the feeder or some specific challenges with that site, then there's a few options. Option one, you can obviously propose a new design, reducing your capacity. Option two, you can fully just withdraw your application or look for another location. And option three, you can pay for system upgrades. And that is where we're adding a new option, which is basically leverage that Flex Connect pathway towards flexibility for your site. How this looked like, we're going to start with now on the image on the right, on the local power controller. This would be for more like smaller sites, ideally behind the meter, that are proposing as well new load. And you will be able to opt into that local power controller option, which basically would end up with your site will end up with a fixed schedule, which would set up a power controller to operate that site and remain as a net importer. Now, this ideally, we're looking for sites that are between 100 to 500 kW, and you would be basically consuming the entire energy of your DG behind the meter and not be exporting it into the site. So if you're working with a customer that is thinking of building a new solar and also thinking of building new load, well, this would be a perfect opportunity to leverage that. Now, on the flip side, if we're looking at a larger solar site, and this could be solar or storage, or solar and storage, both front of the meter or behind the meter, there is an opportunity to leverage ARI, and we would be leveraging a grid edge device that would be on site and would be connected through fiber all the way to our substation, and we can leverage real-time data and therefore send that curtailment signal if there's, for example, a thermal constraint on the feeder. And ideally, if you're incorporating storage to your solar asset, you can simply just store that energy on that curtailed energy on your battery and dispatch it once that curtailment signal goes away. So as you can imagine, it's kind of a good option for not having to wait for those new system upgrades, spend the money on those interconnections, and ideally be able to move forward a little bit faster. So if we can go to our next slide. So what are we looking at as the real value proposition for Flex Connect and for this future offering that we're working on? So there's, as we look at it, as you can imagine, for the customer side, there's multiple benefits, but there's benefits for the Commonwealth and for us within the electric system, the electric power system. So on your end, you'll be able to hopefully be able to leverage faster interconnection timelines and lower system upgrade costs, as I mentioned. And as well, for the Commonwealth, we'll be able to increase the network utilization. As you can imagine, we set our feeders at a lower rate so we can make sure that we will not hit those constraints, but the feeders are not constantly at peak. So therefore, we can increase the amount of renewables throughout the system. This will also be able to increase visibility of the grid and be able to manage additional controls. Therefore, since we're going to be able to see on those feeders how your facility is working, and as well facilitate new generation growth, renewable generation growth, improve customer experience for developers. Hopefully, that's the plan, and increase energy realization towards our Commonwealth clean energy goals. Now, I would like to caveat that our pilot, we are currently running it, but we have closed applications to that pilot as of February this year. And since we got enough interest and we have a big pipeline that our team is working through, but we are planning to scale this up to a standard offering by Q1 2026. So at the moment, me and a few others of the team are working on scaling this to a full offering. So if you have any questions or interest or thoughts around this specific program, please reach out, and we would be happy to answer any questions or even jump on a call to further understand what are you looking for. So with that, I will pass it back to Will for our last part of our session today.
All right, thank you, Arnoldo. Thank you, team. Very good. We're right on schedule. So I will jump into the Q&A. I think we just posted here a couple minutes ago the link again. So if you do have any questions, we've had quite a few come in, submitted both before the meeting and here during the meeting. So I'm going to run through a little bit of a rapid fire, trying to get through as many as we can over the next 15, 20 minutes. Try to get people out of here as on time as we can. So with that, I'll start with, we saw a couple questions come in, and I believe this is related to probably Smart 3 and differences around sort of the size of a project, right? Whether it needs to have ESS tied to it, right? So there's a proposed increase to the battery threshold from 500 to 1,000. And the question is can those be submitted now? Can you submit an application that kind of meets that future incentive requirement? And the answer from a national grid perspective is yes, right? Like we will study, review, screen, study, whatever it is that you submit at this time, right? So what that doesn't guarantee is your participation in any incentive program. Right, we don't know what the timing of either really the study or the incentive program rollout will be, but there are no restrictions to what it is that you submit as part of that application. So we're happy to take it in. We're happy to define the path and start executing based on the process we just spent the last hour talking about, and progress from there. But like I said, there are risks, and there are no guarantees that if you do get to the point where you have an ISA, that project fits within the threshold or the requirements of that incentive program. The other thing just to be aware of is that the potential for significant changes being made to that project. If you guys haven't experienced that before, right, we do have a document posted on our webpage that discuss moderate and significant change, and what kind of gives some guidelines as to how we review that and what types of changes may fall into those buckets. But if you are getting to the point of an ISA and you come back and you're looking to make a significant change that requires us to restart the process or negatively impacts other projects in queue, we would most likely identify that as a significant change and force that project to resubmit an application. And so, not without risk, but whatever you want to submit, we are happy to take in and review. So diving into a few more questions. This one is, how can we get a sub 300 kW behind the meter project exempt from group studies? So not specifically 300, not all projects, but as part of work that we've been doing as part of the IIRG, the interconnection implementation review group, we just submitted to the DPU last month a proposal around reviewing projects that are 250 and below, screening them specifically for whether they'd be an expedited project, and if so, finding a way to exclude them from a group study and all the other stuff that normally comes along with the group study, right? The increased timelines, potential for ASO impacts, but that is in front of the DPU now. We as National Grid are relatively comfortable with that, but again, it doesn't mean that it's going to work 100% for every project, right? Because each area is a little different, right? And what projects come in. So, but we do have things progressing to be able to get smaller size projects out of group studies and be able to move them forward. With that said, we do usually review. We would open a group before that group study is kicked off. We review the members of that group and see if we can figure out if any of those smaller projects are able to progress without the group, right? And I'll touch on a little bit more of how we define what when a group is triggered here, as I'll read the next question. But the next question is, what conditions trigger a group study? So generally, we're looking at a electrically common area, and that electrically common area is most likely multiple substations, right? 2, 3, maybe 4 substations in that common area. And that's just because we have opportunities to cascade, whether it's load or DG in that area, and the solution may not always be upgrade, that specific feeder, upgrade that specific substation that you're looking to connect to. There are other options that we're going to explore, and doing that across a broader electrically common area makes the most sense. But with that said, we have found a lot of opportunities to pull projects out of groups, right? We have dissolved groups, right, that were smaller and projects were spread out and didn't have common modifications. So we were able to, get projects of all different sizes out of group studies and move them forward. But generally, we do trigger the need for a group. We open up a group window. We assess what's going on in that area before making that determination. Moving through, like I said, rapid fire here. So how will interconnections and interconnection group and ASO studies interact or be affected by FERC Order 2023? Right, does National Grid envision a shorter cluster study time frame, less than 270 days, and a post Order 23 condition? I think the short answer is we just don't know. There has been some movement here recently between the FERC and the ISO. But it's probably going to be a few more months before we really fully understand what the ISO expects their process to look like, and or what may be approved by FERC ultimately at that point. So I think what we'll end up targeting as a company is probably an outreach session, a webinar of some sort, right? As we get towards the end of the summer. And some of this is better understood and what those impacts are from a timeline perspective. Right. I just, like I said, it's really kind of hot off the press that there's been some back and forth between the FERC and the ISO here. So to know exactly what this looks like or what the changes are from what we reviewed last summer, not quite sure yet. So we'll continue to monitor that, and then communicate as we know and understand better. Let me see. Next question. So we have a question here about expanding on the process after the first payment has been made, right? And what does the queue look like, right? And I agree the queue is sort of different pre-ISA and post-ISA, right? Pre-ISA is very much based on your queue position, right? How you're studied, right? Where, how all that factors in, and what the conditions are on, any feeder, substation, or electrically common area at the time. Versus post-ISA, where you get to that point, and if you're a individual project moving forward on your own path, right? A lot of it is, based on what's in the ISA and those payment timelines and how quickly you can move through. But generally, once that first payment is made, we move into triggering the design start of the work, and we also sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So once that happens, we then start to build a schedule around that sort of duration-based schedule in attachment 7 as part of the ISA. And so those are the two immediate steps that are triggered once that first payment's made. If there's long lead time items, we start to look at those and whether those should be started to be ordered, or whether we're even in a place to be able to order them at that time. But most of it is starting the design stage and then setting what we call an ECD, which is an estimated connection date. A lot of these projects we're building schedules for, right, with exact dates, and we should be able to have that target date predicted based on where we are, like I said, in the ISA schedule. With that said, very much a chess clock type of schedule. There are going to be tasks that are going to be performed by National Grid, by the interconnecting customer, but then also impacted by third parties, right? So there are permitting, different interactions with towns or concoms or different things like that could extend that timeline. We would change that date as we went along, as we saw some of those impacts. All of it is about just, identifying what that date is in the future, and making sure we're all sort of on the same page, working towards that. So I'm gonna see. So Anish, I think maybe you're going to take this question, but it says, what is the right interconnection application or process for a standalone battery ESS?
So for that, it will be the same as Exhibit C, NDPU 1573, but it will be following the standard process. Only the few additional documents required for this is the ESS questionnaire and ESS narrative, and also the auxiliary work request number if they're using the aux service as a secondary service. But it will mostly follow the standard process.
Yeah, so nothing out of the ordinary there. So a few more questions. Again, I'll try to get through as many of these as I possibly can. It says, what's the study procedure when a new participant joins the process while another participant is already waiting for an ASO study on the same distribution line? So again, not always just specific to the distribution line. Again, substation, common electric area or electrically common area, those factor in too. But generally, if you submit an application in an area where we have ongoing group studies or ongoing ASO studies, you can move through the application process. You can get your application deemed complete, which sets your Q date, and then move through screening. After screening is completed, we'll assess kind of where those studies are at that time and potentially place that project on hold, pending a prior study, right? Whether it's ASO or group study at that point. So the application can still come in. The application will still be reviewed and progress to the point where we, have to stop it prior to starting study. Most of it is based on the need to set a base case for that study to happen. And if we have not progressed preceding studies to a necessary point to establish what that base case is, then that project would have to remain on hold pending the completion of those prior studies. So another one is, are there any plans to update the details currently contained across the ESB? Specifically, it says meter clusters, ground mats, and electrical pole lineups. So don't know specifically about those items, but the ESB is reviewed on a yearly basis. And then it's updated and published. I think we're just coming out of that cycle. I want to say that it was at the beginning of the calendar year. So we're probably not looking at the ESB in any depth for another several months, but the ESBs are reviewed and addressed on a yearly basis. This one talks about group studies real quick, right? What conditions trigger a group study? Is there a certain number of applications on a same circuit or substation over a specific period of time? Or does it have to do with the amount of available capacity on a circuit? So it is triggered by the number of applications coming in, again, in an electrically common area. That can be defined in a couple of different ways, and we have defined it in different ways, whether it is the same feeder, same substation, right? Again, multiple substations and what the potential common solutions could be across those. So, that timeline is actually relatively quick turnaround under a normal process, but because more than half of our areas are in active group study right now, you're most likely being placed on hold, and then, applications are backing up behind those ongoing studies. So as those studies finish, we open up new group study windows at that time. But it does take two projects in that electrically common area to trigger us opening a group study window. And those windows are generally open for a 40 business day period for other projects to come in and take advantage of that group study. Building permit versus interconnection application, can they happen simultaneously? And the answer, again, short answer is yes, right? National Grid does not collect the building permit as part of the application or ISA or really any step in the process. So we do make assumptions that you have site control, you do have the ability to build your site, and you can proceed down the interconnection process at your own risk if you don't have those. But it's absolutely an option to submit your application and move through the process if you are still dealing with the town around your building permit. Next one, timeline based on various project sizes or behind the meter, less than 5 megawatts solar or storage paired with solar. Really, really hard question to answer, right? Because it really is a case by case. Again, depending on what that size is, depending on if you're behind the meter that's going to offset new load, there's a different path, potentially easier path for that. Arnaldo talked about some of the flex connection options that we're piloting right now and we'll be open to right in the future. That there's options there that changes the timeline for the path. Anything greater than 1 megawatt is going to be subject to an ASO study, so that has an impact too. Right, so it really is difficult to state, differences between the different types of interconnection applications that we see. But, for the most part, 50% of National Grid territory is an active group study right now. We do have a number of ongoing ASO studies. right, that do increase our timeline considerably. So it does take a while if you end up in one of those group study ASO study paths. It very well could take upwards of a year and a half to 2 years to sort of play out that entire process. So, but we do and continue to look for opportunities to move some of those projects through where and when we can. Again, working as fast as I can here. So how do we submit for commercial projects? The same way, right? You would. I'm assuming these are DG sites set at commercial locations, not a load commercial type of a project. But if we're talking about DG, it's no different from any sort of standalone, greenfield, brownfield site. Those type of it's all the same application process. You'll go through the screening process, and you'll get your path identified at that point. I know that some group studies have resulted in extremely high costs, which have caused projects and those studies to drop out. The question is it possible to make these studies public so other developers can better understand the situation in the area? So at this point, the answer is no. We do charge for these studies, right? And those studies are performed for those specific projects. And we at National Grid don't consider those to be sort of our property to provide publicly, right? Those studies and results belong to the interconnection customers who paid for it and went through the process. So, so at this time, National Grid is not looking to be sharing those. Obviously, conversations happen all the time, and things do change. But as of right now, we don't feel as though those are ours to share at this point. All right, let me do. I know we're just past 11:30 now. Let me see if I get a couple other quick ones. I'm going to drop, or maybe I can get somebody else, Taylor, or someone to drop in the chat. We had a question here for a link to the current system upgrade cost. So we can drop that link in the chat here. I will caveat that they're from June of 24, which means we are coming up on an update here this summer, but this is what we have posted for this year. Another one is when will National Grid begin allowing use of 5G cellular communications for its wireless meters? So we do have some 5G meters in inventory right now that are available for use. Only the Aclara, I think I'm saying that right, KV2 meter so far is available. Other than that, we don't have any timeline on other meters or future expectations around 5G. But some of the transition has started, but it is limited here at this point. So let me see if there's any other ones. Let me grab this last one here, and this one's talking about SIP fees, and this will be the last one I address. So it says, from looking at hosting capacity map, I saw there's a SIP fee, a capital investment project fee listed. Does the dollar per kilowatt fee apply to projects of all sizes or only to projects below a certain kW threshold? So it's actually not below a threshold, it's above a threshold. So any projects that progress down the simplified path, those projects are not subject to a SIP fee. Anything that we kind of talked about today is part of the complex path. So that could be expedited, that could be a standard process path, and they would be subject to SIP fees, right, as they go into the future. I mean, SIP fees are not just always super clear, right, or guaranteed in some cases, but those things would be identified based on your application, where your POI is going to be, and our assessment of other common work that we've done for that general area, and whether that falls into what we would consider to be a specific SIP area. So, but when it comes to what projects could be subject to a SIP, we are talking about any project that would be in a complex path. Any project that would go down the simplified path would not be subject to that. So that was rapid fire, 20 minutes from me. I think I got through the majority of the questions. I do think there's a few here that we'll address because they are more specific. So we will either reach out directly and touch base, because I think we got just about from everybody contact information on the questions you guys submitted. So we have a few of them that we've identified is to be reached out directly, and otherwise we'll do an FAQ document that we'll post, and we'll try to address every question we were answered, or every question we answered and every question we were unable to answer. We'll try to get that FAQ document to address all those things. So thanks for everybody. As I'm 5 minutes over, thanks for everybody who jumped on today. We will be, when the recording becomes available, we'll get another email out with the link that will take you to the slide deck and the recording. It will take us a little bit to get the FAQ document completed and posted, but we'll have that posted and put in the same spot over the next couple of weeks. But I hope this was helpful, and I'll put another real quick plug in for May 15th, where we in Waltham, we will be having an open house, and encourage everybody to come. It's great just to meet and see people face to face, whose names I see in the portal on a daily basis. But also we'll have a lot of really knowledgeable subject matter experts there and available to discuss individual situations. So appreciate everybody jumping on, and have a great rest of the day. There will be an invite that'll come out for the May 15th that will give the exact location, but it will be in Waltham, Mass. And we'll have an address on the invite. Thank you, everybody.